determined to finish this book. The Winner Stands Alone, Part 11. Alright, so 7:40 p.m. The androgyne, wearing a black shirt, a white bow tie, and a kind of Indian tunic over the same tight trousers that draw attention to his scrawny legs, tells her, now it's a he, it said she last time, I'm so confused. Okay, tells her that they could be arriving at either a very good moment or a very bad one. The traffic's better than I expected. We'll be one of the first to enter Eden Rock. Here, let me see. Yep, there we go. Gabriella, who by now has had her hair and makeup retouched yet again, this time by a makeup artist who seemed totally bored by her work, doesn't understand what this means. Given all the traffic holdups, isn't it best to be early? How could that be bad? The androgyne gives a deep sigh before replying, as if he were having to explain the obvious to someone who doesn't even know the most elementary rules of this world of glamour. Just fair, because you should know. It could be good because you'll be alone in the corridor. The androgyne looks at her, sees a blank expression on her face, utters another deep sigh, and then says, no one walks straight into this kind of party through a door. You always have to go down a corridor first. On one side are the photographers, and on the other is a wall bearing a logo of the party sponsor. Haven't you ever seen photos in celebrity magazines? Haven't you ever noticed that the celebrities are always standing in front of a logo as they smile for the cameras? Celebrity. The arrogant androgyne has let slip the wrong word. He has unwittingly admitted that Gabriella is also a celebrity. Gabriella savors this victory in silence, although she has grown up enough to know that she still has a very long way to go. And what's so bad about arriving on time? Another sigh. The photographers themselves might not have arrived yet, but let's hope I'm mistaken. That way I can hand out a few of these flyers. About me? Okay, first of all, the reason why you never show up on time to a party is because you want to be fashionably late, right? The term fashionably late is a whole thing. Besides, all the cool kids show up late. You surely don't imagine that everyone knows who you are, do you? Sorry to disappoint you, sweetheart. No, I'll have to go on ahead of you and give this wretched bit of paper to each photographer and tell them that the big star of Gibson's next film is about to arrive and that they should have their cameras ready. I'll signal to them as soon as you appear in the corridor. I won't be nice to them, though. I mean, they're used to being treated as what they are, creatures on the lowest rung of power. I'll say I'm doing them a big favor, and they won't want to risk missing a chance and getting fired because there's no shortage of people in the world with a camera and an internet connection, and who are mad keen to post something on the web that everyone else has missed. I reckon that in the future, given the way circulation figures are going, newspapers will rely entirely on services of anonymous photographers as a way of keeping down their costs. He wants to show off his knowledge of the media, but the woman standing beside him isn't interested. She picks up one of the bits of paper and starts reading. Who's Lisa Winner? That's you. We've changed your name, or rather the name had been chosen even before you were selected. From now on, that's what you're called. Gabriella is too Italian, whereas Lisa could be any nationality. Market research shows that the general public finds surnames with between 4 to 6 letters easier to remember. Taylor, Burton, Davis, Woods, Hilton. Shall I go on? No thanks. I can see you know your market, but I need to find out who I am. According to my new biography, she makes no attempt to hide the irony in her voice. She was growing in confidence and beginning to behave like a real star. She starts reading a major discovery chosen from among more than 1,000 applicants to work on the first production by a famous couturier and entrepreneur. Hamid Hussein, etc., etc. The flyers were printed over a month ago, says the androgen, tipping the scales back in his favor. It was written by the group's marketing team, and they're always spot on. Listen, she worked as a model and studied drama. That's you, isn't it? And so I was chosen more for my biography than for the quality of my audition. No, it means that everyone there had the same biography. Look, shall we just stop making jibes at each other and try to be a little bit more human and friendly? Here, in cons, forget it. There's no such thing as friends, only self-interest. There are no human beings, just crazy machines who mow down everything in their path in order to get where they want, or else end up plowing into lampposts. And despite this response, Gabriella feels that she was right and that her companion's animosity is beginning to melt. Look at this, he goes on. For years, she refused to work in the cinema, feeling that the theater was the best way to express her talent. That gives you a lot of bonus points. It shows you're a person with integrity, who only accepted the role in the film because you really loved it, even though you'd been invited to do plays by Shakespeare, Beckett, or Gannett, or whoever. He's obviously very well read, this androgen. Everyone's heard of Shakespeare, but fewer people know about Beckett or Gannett. Gannett. I am probably saying that wrong. Gabriella or Lisa agrees. The car arrives, and there once more are the inevitable security guards in black suits, white shirts, and black ties, all clutching tiny radios as if they were real policemen, or perhaps that's the collective dream of all security guards. One of them waves the driver on because it's too early. The androgen, having weighed up the risks and decided that early is, in fact, best, jumps out of the limousine and goes over to one of the guards, a man twice his size. Gabriella tries to distract herself and think of other things. What sort of car is this? She asks the chauffeur. A Maybach 57S, he replies. He has a German accent, a real work of art, the perfect machine, the ultimate in luxury. It was built. But she's no longer listening. She can see the androgen talking to the huge security guard. The man appears to ignore him and makes a gesture indicating that he should get into the car and stop holding up the traffic. The androgen, a mere mosquito to the security guard's elephant, turns on his heels and walks back to the car. He opens the door and tells Gabriella to get out. They're going in anyway. Gabriella fears the worst, that there will be an almighty row. She walks with the mosquito past the elephant, who says, "Hey, you can't go in there," but they both keep straight on. Other voices shout, "Have a little respect for the rules. We haven't opened the door yet." She doesn't have the courage to look back and imagines that the herd must be hot on their heels, ready to trample them at any moment, but nothing happens, even though the androgen isn't walking any faster. Perhaps out of respect for her long dress, they're passing through an immaculate garden now. The horizon is tinged with pink and blue, the sun is sinking, the androgen is enjoying this new victory. They're all very macho until you face up to them. But you just have to raise your voice, look them straight in the eye, and keep walking. And they won't come after you. I have the invitations, and that's all I need. They may be big, those guys, but they're not stupid. And they know that only someone important would speak to them as I did. He concludes with surprising humility. I've got used to pretending to be important. They reach the hotel, which is totally removed from the hustle and bustle of cons, and suitable only for those guests who don't need to keep going back and forth along the boulevard. The androgen asks Gabriella, Lisa, to go to the bar and order 2 glasses of champagne. This will indicate that she's not alone. No talking to strangers, nothing vulgar, please. He'll go and see how the land lies and distribute the flyers. I'm only doing this for form's sake, really. No one will punish your photo, but this is what I'm paid to do. I'll be back in a minute. But didn't you just say that the photographers... He has reverted to his formal, arrogant self before Gabriella can hit back, though he has vanished. There it is. There are no empty tables. The place is packed with men in dinner jackets and women in long dresses. They're all talking in low voices, those who are talking. For most have their eyes fixed on the sea. That can be seen through the large windows, even though this is their first time in such a place. A palpable, unmistakable feeling hovers over all these celebrated heads, a profound sense of tedium. They all have attended hundreds, possibly thousands, of parties like this. Once they would have felt the excitement of the unknown, of possibly meeting a new love, of making important professional contacts. But now that they have reached the top of their careers, there are no more challenges. All that's left to do is compare one yacht with another, one jewel with your neighbor's jewel. And the people who are sitting at the table nearest the window with those who are farther off, a sure sign of the former superiority. Yes, this is the end of the line. Tedium and endless comparisons. After decades of struggling to get where they are, there seems to be nothing left. Not even the pleasure of having watched one more sunset in one more beautiful place. What are they thinking, those rich, silent women so distant from their husbands? They're thinking about age. They need to go back to their plastic surgeon and redo what time is relentlessly undoing. Gabriella knows that one day this will happen to her as well, and suddenly, perhaps because of all the emotions of that day that is ending so very differently from the way it began, she can feel those negative thoughts returning. Again, there's that feeling of terror mingled with joy. Again, the feeling that despite the long struggle, she doesn't deserve what's happening to her. She's just a girl who's worked hard at her job, but who's still ill-prepared for life. She doesn't know the rules. She's going further than good sense dictates. This world doesn't belong to her, and she'll never be a part of it. She feels helpless and can't remember now why she came to Europe. After all, it's not so dreadful being an actress in a small town America, doing exactly what she likes and not what other people make her do. She wants to be happy, and she's not entirely sure she's on the right path. Stop it. Stop thinking like that. She can't do any yoga exercises here, so she tries to concentrate on the sea, on the blue, on the pink sky. Then she has been given a golden opportunity. She needs to overcome her feelings of revulsion and talk more to the androgen in a few free moments they have before the corridor. She mustn't make any mistakes. She has been lucky, and she must make the most of it. She opens her handbag to take out her lipstick and touch up her lips, but all she sees inside is a lot of crumpled paper. She had been back to the gift room with the bored makeup artist, and again forgotten to collect her things, but even if she had remembered, where would she have put them? That handbag is an excellent metaphor for her current experience. Lovely outside, completely empty inside. She must control herself. The sun has just sunk below the horizon and will be reborn tomorrow with the same force. I need to be reborn now. The fact that I've dreamt of this moment so many times ought to have prepared me, made me more confident. I believe in miracles, and I'm being blessed by God, who listened to my prayers. I must remember what the director used to say to me before each rehearsal. Even if you're doing the same thing over and over, you need to discover something new, fantastic, unbelievable, that went unnoticed the time before. Hold on. Your boy's got cotton mouth. Coffee doesn't help. Enter a handsome man of about 40, with green hair, dressed in an impeccable dinner jacket, handmade by some master tailor. He looks as if he were about to come over to her, but immediately notices a second glass of champagne and heads off to the other end of the bar. She would have liked to talk to him. The androgynous taking such a long time, but she remembers his stern words, nothing vulgar. And it would indeed be reprehensible, inappropriate, embarrassing to see a young woman all alone in the bar of a 5-star hotel go over to an older customer. What would people think? She drinks her champagne and orders another glass. If the androgen has disappeared for good, she has no way of paying the bill, but who cares? Her doubts and insecurities are disappearing as she drinks, and now she's afraid that she might not be able to get into the party and fulfill her commitments. She's no longer the small town girl who has had to struggle to get on in life, and she never will be that person again. The road rises before her, another glass of champagne, and the fear of the unknown becomes a dread that she might never have the chance to discover what it really means to be here. What terrifies her now is the sense that everything could change from one moment to the next. How can she make sure that the miracle of today continues tomorrow? What guarantees does she have that all the promises made earlier will ever be met? She has often before stood outside some magnificent door, some fantastic opportunity, and dreamt for days and weeks about the possibility of what her life might change forever, only to find in the end that the phone didn't ring, or that her CV was mislaid, or that the director would call after and offer his apologies and tell her that they'd found somebody more suitable for the part, which isn't to say you don't have real talent, so don't be discouraged. Life has many ways of testing a person's will, either by having nothing happen at all or by having everything happen all at once. The man who arrived alone has had his eyes fixed on her and on the second glass of champagne. She so wishes he would come over to her. She hasn't had the chance to talk to anyone about what's happening. She thought several times of phoning her family, but her phone was in her real bag and probably full of messages from her roommates wanting to know where she is, if she has any spare invitations, if she'd like to go with them to some second-rate event where such and such a celebrity is going to make an appearance. She can't share anything with anyone. She has taken a big step in her life. She's alone in a bar, terrified that the dream might end, and at the same time knowing that she can never go back to being the person she was. She has nearly reached the top of the mountain. She must either hang on tight or be blown over by the wind. The 40-something man with the graying hair drinking an orange juice is still there. At one point, their eyes meet, and he smiles. She pretends not to have seen him. Why is she so afraid? Because with each new step she's taking, she doesn't quite know how to behave. No one helps her. All they do is give orders and expect them to be rigorously obeyed. She feels like a child locked in a dark room trying to find her way to the door because some very powerful person is calling her and demanding to be obeyed. Her thoughts are interrupted by the androgen who has just come back. Let's wait a while longer. People are only just starting to arrive. The handsome man gets up, pays his bill, and heads for the exit. He seems disappointed. Perhaps he was waiting for the right moment to come over and tell her his name and talk a little. What? She had let her guard drop to 2 glasses of champagne, and her tongue was looser than it should be. Nothing. No, you said you needed to talk a little. She's the little girl in the dark room with no one to guide her. Humility, she must do what she promised herself she would do a few minutes earlier. Yes, I was just going to ask what you're doing here in Cons, how you ended up in this world of which I understand almost nothing. It's not at all as I imagined it would be, believe it or not. And when you went off to talk to the photographers, I felt really alone and frightened. But I know I can count on you for your help, and I wondered whether or not you enjoy your work. Some angel who clearly likes champagne is putting the right words in her mouth. The androgen looks at her in surprise. Is she trying to make friends with him? Why is she asking questions nobody normally dares to ask? And she has only known him for a few hours. No one trusts him because he's not like anyone else. He's unique, contrary to what most people think. He isn't homosexual. He has simply lost all interest in other human beings. He bleaches his hair, wears the clothes he's always dreamt of wearing, weighs exactly what he wants to weigh, and though he knows he makes a strange impression on people, he's not obliged to be nice to anyone as long as he does his job. And now here's this woman asking him what he thinks, how he feels. He picks up the glass of champagne that has been waiting for him and drinks it down in one. She must imagine that he works for Hamid Hussein and has some influence and wants his cooperation and help so as to know what her next step should be. He knows all the steps, but he was only taken on for the duration of the festival and to perform certain tasks. And he'll only do what he's asked to do. And when these days of luxury and glamour are over, he'll go back to his apartment in a Paris suburb, where he gets abused from the neighbors simply because he doesn't fit the conventional model established by whatever madman once declared all human beings are equal. It's not true. All human beings are different and should take their right to be different to its ultimate consequences. He'll watch TV, shop at the supermarket next door, buy magazines, and sometimes go to the cinema. And because he's considered to be a responsible person, he'll get the occasional call from agents who need experienced assistance in the world of fashion. People who know how to dress models and choose accessories to help those new to the fashion world avoid making social blunders and to explain what they should and absolutely shouldn't do. Oh, he has his dreams. He's unique. He tells himself he's happy because he expects nothing more from life. And although he looks much younger, he's actually 40 years old. He did try to get a career.
Pause the recording real quick. I need to tell you something.
Yes. Hold it. Okay, I'm back. Alright, where was I? He did try to get a career as a designer, but couldn't get a decent job and fell out with the people who could have helped him. He no longer has any great expectations, even though he's cultured and has good taste and a will of iron. He no longer believes that someone will look at him, see the way he dresses, and say, "Great, we'd like to talk to you." He's had a few invitations to work as a model, but that was a long time ago, and he doesn't regret having turned them down because being a model wasn't part of his life plan. He makes his own clothes from offcuts discarded by haute couture studios. In Cannes, he's staying with two other people up on the hill, probably not very far from where the young woman is lodging. She, however, is getting her big chance, and however unfair he may feel life to be, he mustn't allow himself to be overwhelmed by frustration and envy. He'll do his very best, because if he doesn't, he won't be invited back as production assistant. Of course he's happy. Anyone who desires nothing is happy. He looks at his watch. It might be a good moment for them to go in. Come on, we'll talk another time. He pays for the drinks and asks for the receipt so he can claim back every penny once the glitz and glamour are over and done with. Some other people are getting up and doing the same thing. He and Gabriella, Lisa, need to hurry. If she isn't to get lost in the crowd that is now beginning to arrive. They walk across the hotel lobby toward the corridor. He hands her two invitations, which he has kept safe in his pocket. After all, important people don't have to bother with such details. They always have an assistant to do that. He is the assistant, and she is the important person. And she's already beginning to show signs that greatness is going to her head. She'll find out soon enough just what this world is capable of, draining every ounce of her energy, filling her mind with dreams, manipulating her vanity, then discarding her just when she thinks she's ready for anything. That's what happened with him, and it happens with everyone. They go down the stairs. They stop in the hall. They stop in the hall just before the corridor. There's no hurry. This is different from the red carpet. If anyone calls her name, she must turn and smile. And if that happens, then the chances are that all the other photographers will start taking photos too. Because if one of them knows her name, she must be important. She shouldn't spend more than 2 minutes posing because this is just the entrance to a party. Even though it seems like something from another world, if she wants to be a star, then she must start behaving like one. Why am I going in alone? Apparently there's been some hitch. He should be here after all. He is a professional. But he has obviously been held up. He is a star. The androgen could have told her what he thought had really happened, but he didn't leave his room when he should have done, which means he's probably met some girl who's got the hots for him. This, however, would hurt the feelings of the novice by his side, who's probably nursing entirely baseless dreams of some lovely love story. He doesn't need to be cruel, just as he doesn't need to be her friend. He simply has to do his job and then leave. Besides, if the silly girl can't control her emotions, the photos taken of her in the corridor might turn out badly. He stands in front of her in the queue and asks her to follow him, but to leave a yard or two between them. As soon as they enter the corridor, he'll go over to the photographers and see if he can get any of them interested. Gabriella waits for a few seconds, puts on her best smile, holds her handbag as she has been taught, straightens her back, and starts to walk confidently ahead, ready to face the flashbulbs. The corridor opens into a brightly lit area. The white hall plastered with the sponsor's logo. On the other side is a small gallery where various lenses are pointed in her direction. She keeps walking, this time trying to be aware of each step. She doesn't want to repeat the frustrating experience of earlier that day when her walk along the red carpet was over before she knew it. She must live in the present moment, as if a film of her life were being shown in slow motion. At some point, the cameras will start to whir. Jasmine, someone shouts out. Jasmine, but her name is Gabriella. She stops for a fraction of a second. A smile froze on her face. No, her name isn't Gabrielle anymore. What is it, Jasmine? Suddenly she hears she hears the sound of camera buttons being pressed. Lenses opening and closing, except all the lenses are pointing at the person behind her. Move, says one photographer. Your moment of glory is over. Get out of the way. She can't believe it. She keeps smiling, but starts to walk more rapidly, now in the direction of the dark tunnel that seems to follow on from that corridor of light. Jasmine, over here, here. The photographers seem to be in the grip of a collective hysteria. She reaches the end of the corridor without having heard anyone call out her name, a name she herself has forgotten. Anyway, the androgen is waiting for her. Don't worry, he says, for the first time showing a little humanity. And the same thing will happen to others, or worse, you'll see people who used to get their name shouted out, but who will walk along the corridor tonight, a smile on their face, waiting for someone to take their photo, only to find that no one bothers. She has to stay cool and in control. It wasn't the end of the world. No demons will appear just yet. Oh, I'm not worried. After all, I only started today. Who's Jasmine, though? She started today, too. It was announced this evening that she's just signed a huge contract with Hamid Hussein, but not to appear in his films, so don't worry. She's not worried. She just wishes the earth would open up and swallow her. Alright, I will be back. I'm gonna take a little break. Alright, gangsters, your boy's back. Weed. Alright, so. Hold up. Okay. Where was I? 8:12 p.m. Smile. Pretend you don't know why so many people are interested in your name. Walk as if you were walking a red carpet, not a catwalk. Careful, other people are arriving. Your quota of time for photos is over. It's best to keep moving. However, the photographers insist on calling out her name, and she feels embarrassed because the next person, a couple in fact, have to wait until the photographers are satisfied, which of course they never are, always looking for the perfect angle, a unique shot, as if such a thing were possible. The shot of her looking straight into the camera. Now wave, still smiling, and walk on. As she reaches the end of the corridor, she's immediately surrounded by a crowd of journalists. They want to know everything about the huge contract she's just signed with one of the best known courtiers in the world. She'd like to say, "It's not true," but instead she says, "We're still studying the details." They insist. A television reporter approaches, microphone in hand, and asks if she's happy about the news. She says she thought that afternoon's fashion show had gone off really well, and that the designer and she oh wait and that the designer, and she makes a point of saying her name, will be holding her next show until the Paris Fashion Week, or her next show during the Paris Fashion Week. I'm sorry. Weed. Okay, give me a break, guys. As you can tell, I don't know shit about fashion. Okay, that's not true. I know a little bit. Look at this. Fashionable AF. Alright, so, back to this. The journalist doesn't appear to know anything about the afternoon show, and the questions keep coming. Except now they're being filmed. Don't drop your guard. Only give the answers you want to give and not the ones they're trying to get out of you. Pretend you don't know the details and just say again how well the show went. About it being a long overdue tribute to Anne Solins, the forgotten genius who had the misfortune not to be born in France. A young man who's a bit of a joker asks how she's enjoying the party. She responds with equal irony, "Well, if you give me a chance to go in, I'll tell you." A former model, now working as a presenter on cable TV, asks how she feels about becoming the exclusive face of the next HH collection. A better informed colleague wants to know if it's true that her salary will be more than 6 digits. They should have put 7-digit salary on the press release, don't you think? He says. More than 6 digits sounds a touch absurd, don't you think? Or even better, they could have said that it's over €1,000,000 instead of making us count the digits, don't you think? And in fact, instead of a 6-digit salary, they could have said 6-figure, don't you think? She doesn't think anything. "We're still looking into it," she says. "Now give me a little air, will you? I'll answer what questions I can later on." This, of course, is a complete lie. Later on, she'll get a taxi straight back to the hotel. Someone asks her why she isn't wearing a Hamid Hussein dress. "I've always worked for her," and again she gives the designer's name. Some of the reporters there note it down, while others simply ignore it. What they want is a piece of publishable news, not the truth behind the facts. She's saved by the pace at which things happen at parties like this. In the corridor, the photographers are already shouting out someone else's name in an orchestrated movement, as if under the baton of an invisible conductor. The journalists surrounding her all in turn see that a bigger and more important celebrity has just arrived. Jasmine takes advantage of this hiatus and heads for the lovely walled garden that has been transformed into a salon where people are drinking, smoking, and walking up and down. Soon she, too, will be able to drink, smoke, and look up at the sky, thump the parapet, turn around, and leave. However, a young woman and a very strange-looking creature, like an android out of a science fiction movie, are staring at her, blocking her path. They clearly don't know what they're doing there either, so she might as well strike up a conversation with them. She introduces herself. The strange creature takes his mobile phone out of his pocket, grimaces, and says he'll be back shortly. The young woman is still staring at her with a look on her face that says, "You ruined my evening." Jasmine is sorry she ever accepted tonight's invitation. It was delivered by 2 men just as she and her partner were getting ready to go to a small reception put on by the BCA, the Belgian Clothing Association. The body that promotes and regulates fashion in her country, but it's not all bad news. If the photos are published, her dress will be seen, and someone might feel interested enough to find out the designer's name. The men who delivered The invitation seemed very polite. They said that a limousine was waiting outside and that they were sure a model of her experience would need only 15 minutes to get ready. One of them opened a briefcase, took out a laptop and a portable printer, and announced that they were there to close a contract. It was simply a matter of fine-tuning the details. They would fill in the conditions, and her agent, they knew that the woman with her was also her agent, would sign. They promised her partner every help with her next collection, and yes, of course, she could keep her name on the label and even use their PR service. More than that, HH would like to buy the brand and thus inject necessary money into it to ensure that she got good coverage in the Italian, French, and British press. There were two conditions. First, the matter had to be decided right there and then, so that they could send a note to the press before the newspapers were put to bed for the night. Second, she would have to transfer her contract with Jasmine Tiger to Hamid Hussein, for whom Jasmine would then work exclusively. There was, after all, no shortage of models, and then the Belgian designer would soon find someone to replace her. Besides Jasmine's agent, she would earn a lot of money. I agreed to the transfer of contract, her partner said, but we'll have to talk about the rest. How could she agree so quickly? The woman who was responsible for everything that happened in her life, and who now seemed perfectly happy to lose her. She was being stabbed in the back by the person she loved most in the world.
Pause your recording.
Oliver, go play.
Please.
Okay, I'm back. Where the hell was I? One of the men took out his BlackBerry. We'll send a press release now. In fact, we've written it already. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity. Just a minute. I'm not thrilled at all. I don't even know what you're talking about. Her partner, however, started editing the text, changing the thrilled to happy and opportunity to invitation. She studied each word and phrase. She demanded that they mention some absurdly high salary. The men disagreed, saying that this might inflate the market. No deal then, came the reply. The two men left the room to make a phone call and returned almost at once. They would put something vague about a 6-digit salary, without mentioning an exact sum. They all shook hands, and the two men complimented both the collection and the model, put laptop and printer back in the bag, and asked the designer to record a formal agreement on one of... I'm like stuck on this wall, sorry. Where was I? On one of their mobile phones, as proof of their negotiations regarding Jasmine had been successful. They left as quickly as they came, both talking on their mobile phones and at the same time urging Jasmine to take no longer than 15 minutes to get ready. Her presence at tonight's party was part of the contract. You'd better get ready then, said her companion.
I'm heating up the water.
Very nice. You don't have the power to decide what I do with my life. You know I don't agree. But I wasn't even asked my opinion. I'm not interested.
A hissing noise. Is that
Oliver, I am reading. Can you please go in the other room?
Dad, that's all I know.
It's fine. I'm not interested in working for anyone else. The woman went over to the dresses, scattered around the room, and chose the most beautiful one, a white dress embroidered with butterflies. She spent a moment considering which shoes and handbag Jasmine should wear. There was no time to lose. They didn't say anything about you wearing a dress by HH tonight, which means we have a chance to show off something from my collection. Jasmine couldn't believe what she was hearing. Is that why you did it? Yes, it is. They were standing facing each other, and neither of them looking away. You're lying. Yes, I'm lying. And they fell into each other's arms. Ever since that weekend on the beach, when we took those first photographs, I knew this day would come. It took a while, but you're 19 now and old enough to accept a challenge. Other people have approached me before, but I've always said no. And I never knew whether It was just that I didn't want to lose you, or because you weren't quite ready. Today, though, when I saw Hamid Hussein in the audience, I knew he wasn't there simply to pay tribute to Aunt Solen's, and that he must have something else in mind, and that could only be you. Sure enough, I got the message saying he wanted to talk to us. I didn't know quite what to do, but I gave him the name of our hotel. It was no surprise when those two men arrived with the contract. But why did you accept? If you love someone, you must be prepared to set them free. He can offer you far more than I can, and you have my blessing. I want you to have everything you deserve. We'll still be together because you have my heart, my body, and my soul, and I'll keep my independence. Although I know how important sponsors can be in this world. If Hamid Hussein had come to me with a proposal to buy my label, I would have had no problem in selling it and going to work for him. However, the deal wasn't about me, it was about you. And if I accepted part of the proposal involving me, that would mean being untrue to myself. She kissed Jasmine. Well, I can't accept either, declared Jasmine. I was just a frightened child when I met you. Terrified because I'd perjured myself in court. Wretched because I'd been responsible for letting criminals go free. And so depressed that I was seriously considering suicide. You're responsible for everything that's happened in my life. Her partner asked her to sit down in front of the mirror, and before doing anything else, she tenderly stroked her hair. When I met you, I'd lost all zest for my life as well. My husband had left me for someone younger, better looking, and richer. Then I was forced to become a photographer to make a living, spending my weekends at home, reading, surfing the internet, or watching old films on TV. My great dream of becoming a designer seemed to be moving ever farther off. I couldn't get the necessary financial backing, and I'd had enough of knocking on doors that never opened or talking to people who didn't listen to what I was saying. That's when you appeared, and that weekend, I have to confess, I was only thinking about myself. I knew I had a rare jewel in my hands, and I could make a fortune if I get you to sign an exclusive contract with me. I seem to remember that I even suggested I should become your agent. I didn't do that out of desire to protect you from the world. My thoughts at the time were selfish as Hamid Hussein's. I would know how to exploit my treasure. I would get rich on those photos. She gave a few final touches to Jasmine's hair. And you, even though you were only 16 then, showed me how love can change a person. It was through you that I discovered who I am. In order to show off your talent to the world, I started designing clothes for you to wear. Clothes that had been in my head all the time, waiting to be transformed into fabrics, embroidery, accessories. We lived together, and even though I was more than twice your age, we learned together as well. Thanks to all these things, people started noticing what I was doing and decided to invest in it. And for the first time, I began to realize my dreams. We traveled here to cons together, and no contract is going to part us. She went to the bathroom to fetch the makeup case. Her tone grew more businesslike. You need to look really stunning tonight. Models rarely rise to stardom out of nowhere, so there will be a lot of media interest. Just say you don't know the details yet. That's enough. But they'll keep asking and trying to get you to say things like, I've always dreamed of working with Hamid Hussein, or this is a very important step in my career, etc. She went with Jasmine down to the hotel lobby, where the waiting chauffeur opened the car door. Remember, you don't know the details of the contract yet. Your agent is taking care of all that. Enjoy the party. At the party, or rather supper, although she can see neither tables nor food, only waiters walking about, proffering every possible kind of drink, including mineral water. People form into small groups, and anyone arriving alone looks somewhat lost. The event is taking place in a vast garden furnished with armchairs and sofas. There are also several pillars about 3 feet high on which half-clothed models with perfect bodies are dancing to the sound of music that emerges out of a strategically strategically positioned loudspeakers. Celebrities continue to arrive. The guests seem happy. They smile and greet each other as if they'd known each other for years, although Jasmine knows this isn't so. They probably meet now and again on occasions like this, and always forget each other's names, but need to show how very influential, famous, admired, and well concerned they are. The young woman who initially looked so angry reveals that she too is feeling completely lost. She asks for a cigarette and introduces herself. Within a matter of minutes, they know each other's life story. Jasmine leads her over to the balustrade. Whatever, it's not. English ain't my first name. My first language. Words! Overlooking the Mediterranean. And while the party fills up with strangers and acquaintances, they stand there gazing out to sea. They discover that they're now working for the same man, although on different projects. Neither of them has ever met him, and for both of them, everything has happened during this one day. Men occasionally try to engage them in conversation, but Gabriella and Jasmine ignore them. Gabriella is the person Jasmine needed to meet, someone with whom to share her sense of having been abandoned despite her partner's loving words. If she had to choose between her career and the love of her life, she would choose love over career every time. But she didn't care if such behavior seemed adolescent, because she is an adolescent. Now it turns out that the love of her life wants her to put her career first and seems to have accepted HH's proposal simply so that she can feel proud of everything she'd done for her, of the care with which she's guided her steps and corrected her mistakes, and the enthusiasm she's put into every word spoken and the decision taken, however difficult. Gabriella had needed to meet Jasmine too, to ask her advice, to feel less alone, and to see that good things happen to other people too. She confesses that she's worried that her companion has just left her there, when he's supposed to be introducing her to various people she needs to meet. He thinks he can hide his feelings, but I know something's wrong. Jasmine tells her not to worry, to relax, drink some champagne, and enjoy the music and the view. Unforeseen things are always happening, and there's a whole army of people ready to deal with them, so that no one ever finds out what really goes on behind the scenes of all that wealth and glamour. The star is sure to be here soon. But please, don't leave me on my own, will you? I'm not staying long. Gabriella promises that she won't leave her alone. She is her only friend in this new world. Yes, her only friend, but Jasmine's so young that Gabriella suddenly feels too old to be starting out on a new track. The star had shown himself to be utterly superficial during the limousine drive to the red carpet. All his charm had vanished, and however much she likes the young girl by her side, she needs to find some new male companion for the night. She notices the man who came into the bar earlier is standing, like them, by the balustrade. It's hard to say that word. No. Looking out to sea, his back to the party, oblivious to everything else going on at this gala supper. He's charismatic, handsome, elegant, mysterious. When the opportunity arises, she'll suggest to her new friend that they go over and talk and start a conversation. Or go over to him and start a conversation. Sorry, I'm dyslexic, if you haven't realized yet. It really doesn't matter what about. After all, and despite all, this has been her lucky day, and it might include finding a new love. Gross. Let's see, how far are we in this story? Okay, just checking. 8:21 p.m. The pathologist, the commissioner, Savoy, and the fourth person who has not been introduced but who arrived with the commissioner are sitting around a table. Their task is not to discuss the latest murder, but to draw up a joint statement to be presented to the journalists gathering outside. And this time a really big star has died. A well-known director is in intensive care, and the news agencies from around the world have obviously sent a stark message to their journalists. Either come up with something we can print or you're fired. Legal medicine is one of the most ancient of the sciences, involved as it is with identifying poisons and producing antidotes. Nevertheless, in the past, royalty and nobility have always preferred to employ an official taster, just to avoid any nasty surprises the doctor failed to foresee. Savoy had met this sage earlier today. This time he allows the commissioner to step in and to put a stop to the pathologist's erudite lecture. That's enough showing off, doctor. There's a criminal on the loose in Cons. The pathologist remains impassive. As a pathologist, I don't have the authority to determine circumstances of murder. I can't give opinions on the matter. I can only describe the cause of death, the weapon used, the identity of the victim, and the approximate time when the crime was committed. Do you see any link between the two deaths? Is there something that connects the murder of the film distributor and the actor? Of course. They both worked in the movies, he chuckled, but no one else moves a muscle. They clearly have no sense of humor. The only connection is that in both cases, toxic substances were used, both of which affect the organism with extraordinary speed. What is really intriguing about the second murder, though, is the way in which the hydrogen cyanide was wrapped. The envelope had inside it a fine plastic membrane, vacuum sealed, but easily torn when the envelope was opened. Could it have been made here? Asked the fourth man, who has a strong foreign accent. Possibly, but I doubt it, because its actual manufacture is very complex, and the person who made it knew that it would be used to murder someone. So the murderer didn't make it. I doubt it. A specialist group would almost certainly have been commissioned to produce it. In the case of the curati, the criminal himself could have dipped the needle in the poison, but the hydrogen cyanide requires special techniques. Savoy's thoughts immediately go to Marseille, Corsica, Sicily, and certain Eastern European countries and terrorist groups in the Middle East. He leaves the room for a moment and phones Europol. He explains the gravity of the situation and asks them for a complete rundown on laboratories equipped to produce chemical weapons of that type. He's put through to someone who tells him that they've just had a call from an American intelligence agency asking exactly the same thing. What's going on? Nothing, but please get back to me as soon as you have any information, in the next 10 minutes at the latest. That's impossible, says the voice on the other end. We'll give you the answer as soon as we have it, not before or afterward. We'll have to put in a request. Savoy hangs up and rejoins the group. More paper. This appears to be an obsession common to everyone working in the field of public security. No one wants to risk taking a step without first having a guarantee that their superiors approve of what they're doing. Men who have had a brilliant career ahead of them and began working with creativity and enthusiasm now cower fearfully in a corner, knowing the enormous problem they face. They need to act swiftly, but at the same time, the hierarchy of command must be respected. The media are always so quick to accuse the police of brutality, while the taxpayers complain that crimes are never solved. For those reasons, it's always best to pass responsibility on to someone higher up. His telephone call was really just a bit of play acting. He knows who the killer is, and he alone will catch him. He doesn't want anyone else snatching from him the glory of having solved the biggest murder case in the history of Cons. He must keep calm, but he is nevertheless impatient for the meeting to end. When he goes back into the room, the commissioner informs him that Stanley Morris, formerly of Scotland Yard, has just phoned from Monte Carlo, telling them not to worry because he very much doubts that the criminal will use the same weapon again. He could be facing a new terror threat, says the foreigner. Yeah, possibly, replies the commissioner, but unlike you, the last thing we want to do is sow fear among the population. What we need to do is drop a press statement to prevent journalists from leaping to their own conclusions and broadcasting them on tonight's TV news. But this is an isolated terrorist incident and may involve a serial killer. But there are no buts. The commissioner's voice is firm and authoritative. We contacted your embassy because the dead man comes from your country. You're here at our invitation. In the case of the two other Americans murdered, you showed no interest at all in sending a representative, even though in one case poison was also used. So if you're trying to insinuate that we're facing some kind of collective threat in which biological weapons are being used, you can leave now. We're not going to turn a criminal matter into something political. We want to have another festival next year with all the usual glitz and glamour. So we're taking Mr. Morris's advice and we'll drop a statement along those lines. The foreigner says nothing. The commissioner summons an assistant and asks him to tell the waiting journalists that they will have their conclusions in 10 minutes. The pathologist tells him that it's always possible to track down the origin of a hydrogen cyanide because it leaves a kind of signature. But tracking it down will take not 10 minutes, but a week. There were traces of alcohol in the body. The skin was red and death was almost instantaneous. There's no doubt.
I heard a bang against the front door.
Well, don't answer it.
No, I'm just telling you.
There's no doubt about which poison was used. If it had been an acid, we would have found burns around the nose and mouth, and in the case of belladonna, the pupils would have been dilated. And please, doctor, we know that you studied at a university and are therefore equipped to tell us the cause of death, and we have no doubts about your competence in the field. Let us conclude that it was hydrogen cyanide. The doctor nods and bites his lip, controlling his irritation. And what about the other man who's currently in the hospital, the film director? We're treating him with pure oxygen, 600 milligrams of kelocyanur, whatever. I've never poisoned people. Why would I know the word? Via intravenous drip every 15 minutes. And if that doesn't work, we can add sodium thiosulfate diluted in 25%. The silence in the room is palpable. Sorry, the answer is yes, he'll survive. The commissioner makes some notes on a sheet of yellow paper. He knows that he's run out of time. He thanks everyone and asks the foreigner not to come out with them, so as to avoid any further needless speculation. He goes to the bathroom, adjusts his tie, and asks the boy to adjust his as well. Moore says that the murderer won't use poison next time. From what I've gleaned, the killer's following a pattern. Although it may be an unconscious one. Do you know what it is? Savoy had thought about this as he was driving back from Monte Carlo. Yes, there was a pattern, which possibly not even the great Scotland Yard inspector had noticed. It was this. The victim on the beach, the murderer was close. The victim at lunch, the murderer was far away. The victim on the beach, the murderer was close. The victim at the hotel, the murderer was far away. Therefore, the next crime will be committed with the murderer at his victim's side, or rather, that will be his plan, unless he is arrested in the next half hour. He learned all this from his colleagues at the police station, who gave him the information as if it were of no importance. And Savoy, in turn, had initially dismissed it as irrelevant too, but of course, it wasn't. It was the missing link, the vital clue, the one piece needed to complete the puzzle. His heart was pounding. He dreamt of this his whole life, and cannot wait for this interminable meeting to end. Are you listening? Yes, sir. Look, the people out there aren't expecting some official technical statement with precise answers to their questions. And the fact is, they'll do all they can to make us say what they want to hear, but we mustn't fall into that trap. They came here not to listen to us, but to look at us, and for their viewers and readers to be able to see us too. He regards Savoy with a superior air, as if he were the most knowledgeable person on the planet. It would seem that Morris and the pathologist are not the only ones who like to show off their knowledge. Well, everyone has their own way of saying, I know my job. Think visual, by which I mean remember that your face and body say more than words. Look straight ahead, keep your head up, keep your shoulders down and slightly back. Raised shoulders means tension, and are a sure indication that we have no idea what's going on. Yes, sir. They walk out to the entrance of the Institute of Legal Medicine. Lights come on, microphones are thrust forward, people start to push. After a few minutes, this apparent disorder becomes more orderly. The commissioner takes a piece of paper out of his pocket. The actor was killed with hydrogen cyanide, a deadly poison that can be administered in many ways, although in this case it was used in a form of gas. The film director survived the attack. His involvement was clearly accidental. He merely happened to enter the room while there were still remnants of gas in the air. The CCTV footage shows a man walking down the corridor, going into one of the rooms, and 5 minutes later coming out again and falling to the floor. He omits to say that the room in question is not actually visible to the camera. Omission is no lie. The security... I disagree. The security personnel took swift action and sent for a doctor who immediately noticed the smell of almonds, which was by then too dilute to cause any harm. The police were called and they arrived at the scene less than 5 minutes later, cordoned off the area. An ambulance came and the doctors used oxygen to save the director's life. Savoy is beginning to feel really impressed by the commissioner's easy manner. He wonders if all commissioners have to do a course in public relations. The poison was delivered in an envelope, but we have not as yet been able to establish whether the writing on the envelope was that of a man or a woman. Inside was a piece of paper. He fails to mention that the technology used to seal the envelope was highly sophisticated. There was a chance in a million that one of the journalists present would know this, although later on that kind of question would become inevitable. He also fails to mention that another man in the film industry had been poisoned that same afternoon. Apparently everyone thinks he died of a heart attack, although no one has actually told them this. Sometimes it's handy if the press, out of laziness or inattention, draw their own conclusion without bothering the police. What was on the paper? Is his first question. The commissioner explains that he cannot reveal this now because doing so might hamper the investigation. Savoy is beginning to see the direction in which he is leading his interview, and is filled with admiration. He really deserves his post as commissioner. Could it have been a crime of passion? Here, I'm gonna go shut my door. Sorry, there's life happening. Alright, I'm back. That was sure to capture people's interest. The power of celebrity was so great that the other murders would go unnoticed. Who cares about a poor young girl who died possibly under the influence of drugs and was found on a bench near the beach? What did it matter if some henna-haired film distributor had a heart attack over lunch? What was there to say about a murder, another crime of passion involving two complete non-entities who were never in the spotlight on a beach away from all the hurly-burly of the festival? It was the kind of thing that appeared every night on the television news. But the media would only continue speculating about it if a major celebrity was involved, and an envelope and a piece of paper inside on which something was written. He turns on the siren and drives in the opposite direction from the police station. In order not to raise suspicions, he uses the car radio and finds the commissioner's frequency. Congratulations! The commissioner is also rather pleased with himself. Oh, I can't get comfortable, I'm sorry. They've gained a few hours, possibly days, but they know that they're dealing with a serial killer of the male sex, well-dressed, with graying hair, and about 40 years old, and armed with sophisticated weapons, a man who is experienced in the art of killing, and while he may be satisfied with the crimes he's already committed, he could easily strike again at any moment. Have officers sent to all the festival parties, orders the commissioner. They should look out for any men on their own who correspond to that description. Tell them to keep any suspects under surveillance. Call for reinforcements. I want plainclothes policemen, discreetly dressed and in keeping with their surroundings. Either jeans or evening dress. And I repeat, I want them all at the parties. Even if we have to mobilize the traffic police as well. Savoy immediately does as he's told. He has just received a message on his mobile phone. Europol needs more time to track down the laboratories, at least 3 days. Let me have that in writing, will you? I don't want to be held responsible if something else goes wrong here. He chuckled quietly. He asked them to send a copy to the foreign agent as well, since he himself is no longer interested in the matter. He drives as fast as he can to the Hotel Martinez, leaves his car at the entrance blocking other people's vehicles. When the porter complains, he shows him his policeman ID, throws him the keys so he can park the car somewhere else, and runs into the hotel. He goes up to a private room on the first floor, where the police officer is waiting, along with the duty manager and a waiter. How much longer are we going to have to stay here? Asks the duty manager. Savoy ignores her and turns to the waiter. Are you sure that the murdered woman whose picture appeared on the news is the same woman who was sitting on the terrace this afternoon? Yes, sir, pretty much. She looks younger in the photo with her hair dyed, but I'm used to remembering guest faces, just in case one of them tries to leave without pain. And are you sure she was with the male guest who reserved the table earlier? Absolutely. A good-looking man of about 40, green hair. Savoy's heart almost leaps out of his mouth. He turns to the manager and the policeman. Let's go straight up to his room. Do you have a search warrant? Asked the manager. Savoy's nerves snap. No, I haven't, and I'm not filling in any more forms. Do you know what's wrong with this country, madam? We're all too obedient. In fact, that isn't a problem peculiar to us. It applies to the whole world. Wouldn't you obey if they wanted to send your son off to the war? Wouldn't your son obey? Of course. Well, since you are an obedient citizen, either take me to the room or I'll have you arrested for aiding and abetting. The woman seems genuinely frightened. With the other policemen, they make their way over to the lift, which is coming down, stopping at every floor, unaware that a human life may depend on the speed with which those waiting for it can act. They decide to take the stairs instead. The manager complains because she's wearing high heels, but Savoy simply tells her to take off her shoes and go up the stairs barefoot. They race up the marble stairs, gripping the bronze banisters so as not to fall and passing various elegant waiting areas along the way. The people there wonder who this barefoot woman is and what a uniformed policeman is doing in the hotel running up the stairs like that. Has something bad happened? If so, why don't they take the elevator? Standards at this festival are definitely dropping. They say to themselves, hotels aren't as selective about their guests as they once were, and the police treat the place as if they were raiding a brothel. As soon as they can, they will complain to the manager, who, unbeknownst to them, is the same barefoot woman they've just been bounding up the stairs, or they've just seen bounding up the stairs. Savoy and the duty manager finally reach the door of the suite where the murderer is staying. A member of the security squad has already sent someone up to find out what's going on. He recognizes the manager and asks if he can help. Savoy asks him to speak more quietly, but yes, he can help. Is he armed? The guard says that he is. Then you'd better stay here. They are talking in whispers. The manager is instructed to knock on the door. While three men, Savoy, the policeman, and the security guard, stand on one side, backs to the wall. Savoy takes his gun out of his holster. The other policeman does the same. The manager knocks several times but gets no answer. He must have gone out. Savoy asks her to use the master key. She explains that she doesn't have it with her, and even if she did, she would only open that door with the authorization of the managing director. Savoy responds politely at this time. No matter, I'll go downstairs and wait in the surveillance room with the security staff. He'll be back sooner or later. And I'd like to be the first to question him. We have a photocopy of his passport and credit card number downstairs. Why are you so interested in him? Oh, no matter. At 9:02 p.m. Half an hour's drive from Cannes, in another country where they speak the same language, use the same currency, and have no border controls, and where they have a completely different political system from France. It's ruled by a prince, as in the olden days. A man is sitting in front of a computer 15 minutes ago. He received an email informing him that a famous actor had been murdered. Morris studies the photo of the victim. He hasn't been to the cinema for ages and so has no idea who he is. However, he must be someone important because there are reports of his death on one of the news portals. Morris may be retired, but things like this used to be the equivalent of a chess game to him, a game in which he rarely allowed his opponent to win. It wasn't his career that was at risk now, it was his self-esteem. There are certain rules he always liked to follow when he worked for Scotland Yard, one of which was to come up with as many flawed hypotheses as he could. This freed up your mind because you weren't necessarily expecting to get it right. At the tedious meetings with work evaluation committees, he used to enjoy provoking the people present. Everything you know comes from experience accumulated over long years of work. However, those old solutions are only of use when applied to old problems. If you want to be creative, try to forget that you have all that experience. The older members of such committees would pretend they were taking notes. The younger ones would stare at him in horror, and the meeting would continue as if he had said nothing. But he knew that the message had been received loud and clear. And soon afterward, his superiors, without giving him any of the credit, of course would start demanding more ideas. He prints out the files sent by the police in Cannes. He normally tries to avoid using paper because he doesn't want to be accused of being a serial killer of forests, but sometimes it's necessary. He starts studying the modus operandi. That is the way the crimes were committed. Time of day, morning, afternoon, night. Weapons, hand, poison, stiletto knife. Type of victim, men and women of different ages. Closeness to victim, 2 involved direct physical contact, 2 involved no contact at all. The reaction of victims to their aggressor, none in all cases. When he feels that he is faced by a dead end, the best thing is to let his thoughts wander for a while. While his unconscious mind goes to work, he opens a new screen on the computer showing the New York Stock Exchange. Since he has no money invested in shares, it couldn't be more boring. But that's how it works. His years of experience analyze all the information he has received so far, and his intuition comes up with new creative responses. 20 minutes later, he goes back to the files, and his head is once again empty. The process has worked. The murderers do have things in common. The murderer is an educated man. He must have spent days and weeks in a library studying the best ways to carry out his mission. He knows how to handle poisons, and obviously hadn't touched the hydrogen cyanide himself. He knows enough about anatomy to be able to stick a knife in at exactly the right place without meeting a bone to kill someone with his bare hands. He knows about karate and its lethal power. He may have read about serial killings and would be aware of some kind of signature always leads the police to the attacker. And so he'd committed his murders in a completely random manner with no fixed modus operandi at all. But that's impossible. The unconscious mind of the murderer is bound to leave some signature, which Morris has not yet managed to decipher. There's something more important still. He obviously has money enough to follow a course in Sambo in order to be absolutely sure which points on the body he needs to press in order to paralyze his victim. He also has contacts. He didn't buy those poisons from the corner pharmacist, not even from the local criminal underworld. They're highly sophisticated biological weapons, which require great care in their handling and application. He must have got other people to acquire them for him. Finally, he works very quickly, which leads Morris to conclude that the murderer won't be staying long, perhaps a week, perhaps a few days more. Where does all this take him? The reason he can't reach a conclusion now is because he got used to the rules of the game. He has lost the innocence he always demanded of his subordinates. That's what the world does to people. Gradually, over the years, we become mediocre beings, concerned not to be seen as weird or over-enthusiastic. Old age is considered a stigma, not a sign of wisdom. People assume that no one over 50 can keep up with the speed of change nowadays. True, he can't run as fast as he could, and needs reading glasses, but his mind is as sharp as ever, or so at least he wants to believe. But what about this crime, though? If he's as intelligent as he thinks, why can't he solve something that seems so easy? He can't get any further at the moment. He'll have to wait until the next victim appears. 9:11 p.m. A couple pass by. They smile and congratulate him on his luck at having two such lovely ladies by his side. Igor thanks them, for he's genuinely in need of distraction. Soon the long-awaited meeting will take place, and although he is accustomed to all kinds of pressure, he reminds himself of the patrols he had to go on near Kabul, and how before any very dangerous mission, he and his colleagues would drink and talk about women and sport, chatting away as if they weren't in Afghanistan. But we're back in their hometown, sitting around a table with family and friends. It was a way of quelling their nerves and recovering their true identities, and thus feeling better prepared for the challenges they would face the next day. Like any good soldier, he knows that battles have more to do with aims and objectives than with the actual fighting. Like any good strategist, he did, after all, build up his company from nothing to become one of the most respected in Russia. He knows that one's objective should always remain the same, even if the motive behind it may change over time. That is what happened today. He arrived in Cons for one reason, but only when he began to act did he understand the true motives behind what he was doing. He has been blind all these years, but now he can see the light. The revelation has finally come, and precisely because of this, he needs to keep going. The decisions he made required courage, a degree of detachment, and at times, even a little madness. Not the kind of madness that destroys, but the kind the kind that carries a person beyond his own limits. He's always been the same, and has won precisely because he knew how to use that controlled madness whenever he had to make a decision. His friends would move with astonishing speed from saying, "It's too risky," to, "I always knew you were doing the right thing." He was capable of surprising people, of coming up with fresh ideas, and above all, taking any necessary risks. Here in Cons, though, perhaps because he's in an unfamiliar place and still befuddled by lack of sleep, he has taken quite unnecessary risks. Risks that might have forced him to abort his plan earlier than expected. Had that happened, he would have never reached his present clear-eyed position, one that cast an entirely different light on the woman he thought of as his beloved and whom he believed merited both sacrifice and martyrdom. He remembers the moment when he went up to the policeman to confess. That was when the change began. It was then that the spirit of the girl with the dark eyebrows began to protect him and to explain that he was doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. Accumulating love brings luck. Accumulating hatred brings disaster. Anyone who stands outside the door of problems and fails to recognize it may well end up leaving it open and allowing tragedies to enter. He had accepted the young girl's love. He had been an instrument of God, sent to rescue her from a dark future. Now she was helping him to carry on. He is aware, too, that regardless of the many precautions he may have taken, he could not have possibly have thought of everything, and his mission might yet be interrupted before he reaches the end. There is no reason, however, to regret or fear. He has done what he could, behaved impeccably, and if God does not wish him to complete his task, then he must accept his decisions. Relax, he tells himself. Talk to the young women by your side. Let your muscles rest a little before the final strike. That way, they'll be more prepared. Gabriella, the young woman who was alone at the bar when he arrived, seems very excited. And whenever the waiter comes by with more drinks, she hands him her glass, even if it's still half full, and picks up a fresh one. "I love it when it's really icy," she says. Her happiness infects him a little, too. Apparently, she's just signed a contract to appear in a film, although she knows neither the title of the film nor what role she'll be playing, but she will, in her words, be the leading lady. The director is known for his ability to choose good actors and good scripts, and the leading actor, whom Igor knows and admires, certainly merits respect. When she mentions the name of the producer, he merely nods knowledgeably, as if to say, "Yes, of course, I know who he is," aware that she'll interpret the nod as meaning, "I have no idea who he is, but I don't want to appear ignorant." She babbles on about rooms full of gifts, the red carpet, her meeting on the yacht, the rigorous selection process she went through, future projects. At this very moment, there are thousands of young women in Cons and millions around the world who would like to be here tonight talking to you and being able to tell these stories. My prayers have been answered and all my efforts rewarded. The other young woman seems more discreet, but sadder too, perhaps because of her age and lack of experience. Igor had been there when she walked down the corridor and had heard the photographers calling out her name and clamoring to ask her questions afterward. Apparently, though, the other people at the party had no idea who she was. She had been so in demand at the start and then just as suddenly had been dropped. It was probably the talkative young woman who had decided to come over to him and ask him what he was doing there. At first, he'd felt rather constrained, but he knew that if they hadn't approached him, other solitary people would have done so, to avoid the impression that they were lost and alone and with no friends at the party. And that's why he welcomed their conversation, or rather their company, even though his mind was elsewhere. He told them his name was Gunther and explained that he was a German industrialist specializing in heavy machinery, a subject guaranteed to interest no one, and had been invited there by friends. He would be leaving tomorrow, which he hoped would be true, but God moves in mysterious ways. When the actress learned that he didn't work in the film industry and wouldn't be staying long at the festival, she almost moved away. However, the other girl stopped her, saying that it's always good to meet new people. And so there they are, he waiting for the friend who showed no signs of arriving, the actress waiting for her vanished assistant, and the quiet girl waiting for absolutely nothing, just a little peace. Suddenly, the actress notices some fluff on his dinner jacket, and before he can stop her, she rushes to brush it away. She says, "Oh no, do you smoke cigars?" That's a relief, he thinks. The object inside his her That's a relief. She thinks the object inside his jacket pocket is a cigar. Yes, but only after supper. If you like, I could invite you both to a party on a yacht tonight, but first I need to find my assistant. The other girl suggests that maybe she's being a little precipitate, and she has only been signed up for one film and has a long way to go before she can surround herself with friends or with an entourage. That word universally used to describe the parasites who have her around celebrities. She should respect the rules and go to the party alone. The actress thanks her for this advice. Then a waiter passes, and she again places her half-full glass of champagne on the tray and takes another one. "I think you should stop drinking so much," says Gunther, delicately taking the glass from her and pouring the contents over the balustrade. She makes a despairing gesture, then accepts that he's right. Realizing that he has had her best interest at heart. "I'm just so excited," she says. "I need to calm down a little bit. Do you think I could smoke one of your cigars?" "I'm afraid I only have one. Besides, it's been scientifically proven that nicotine is a stimulant, not a tranquilizer." "A cigar, well, they are similar in shape, but that's all the two objects have in common. In his inside jacket pocket, he has a suppressor, or it's more commonly known as a silencer. It's about 4 inches long, and once attached to the barrel of a Beretta he has in his trouser pocket, it can work miracles, and by changing bang into poof. This is because when a gun is fired, a few simple laws of physics come into effect. The speed of the bullet is slightly diminished as it's forced past a series of rubber baffles. Meanwhile, the gases produced by the firing of the gun fill the hollow chamber around the cylinder, cool rapidly, and suppress the noise of the gunpowder exploding. The silencer is useless for long-range shooting because it affects the trajectory of the bullet, but it's ideal for firing at point-blank range. Igor is beginning to grow impatient. Could Iwo and her husband have canceled their invitation, or could it be, and for a fraction of a second his head swims, that he had slipped the envelope under the door to that suite in which they were staying? No, that's not possible. That would be such a stroke of bad luck. He thinks of the families of those who have died. If his sole objective was still to win back the woman who left him for a man who did not deserve her, all his work would have been in vain. His composure begins to crack. Could that be why Iwa hasn't attempted to contact him? Despite all the messages he sent her, he has twice rung their mutual friend, only to be told there was no news. His doubt is beginning to become certainty. Yes, the couple were both dead. That would explain the sudden departure of the actress's assistant, and why no one was bothering with the 19-year-old model who was supposed to appear at the great coutier's side. Was God punishing him for having loved a woman he did not deserve and had loved too much? His ex-wife had used his hands to strangle a young woman who had her whole life ahead of her, who might have gone on to discover a cure for cancer, a way of making humanity realize that it was destroying the planet. Eva may have known nothing about the murder, but she was who had made him. My hair, sorry. Okay, this is not my dyslexia. This is the way he wrote it. But it was she who had made him use those poisons. It was written, but it was who. But I believe he was saying, but it was she who. Okay, sorry. He had been sure that he would only have to destroy one world and that the message would reach its intended recipient. He had taken that small arsenal with him, knowing that it was all just a game, certain that on the first night she would go to the bar for a glass of champagne before joining the party. I sensed his presence there and realized that she had been forgiven for all the evil and destruction she had unleashed around her. He knows that, according to scientific research, people who have spent a lot of time together can sense their partner's presence in a place, even if they don't know exactly where they are. That didn't happen. Ewa's indifference last night, or perhaps her guilt at what she had done to him, had prevented her from noticing the man trying to hide behind a pillar, but who had left on the table various Russian economics journals, which should have been a large enough clue for anyone who was constantly looking for what she had lost. When you're in love, you imagine that you'll see the love of your life everywhere, in the street, at a party, or in the theater, but Ewa had perhaps exchanged love for a life of glamour. He is beginning to feel calmer now. Ewa was the most powerful poison on the earth, and if she'd been killed by hydrogen cyanide, that was nothing. She deserved far worse. I disagree. The two young women continued talking. Igor moves away from them. He cannot allow himself to be overwhelmed by the fear that they might have destroyed his own work, or that he might have destroyed his own work. He needs solitude, calm, the ability to react swiftly to this sudden change in direction. He goes over to another group of people who are animatedly discussing various methods of giving up smoking. This was one of the favorite topics in that particular world. Showing your friends that you had the necessary willpower to defeat the foe. To take his mind off other things, he lights a cigarette, knowing full well this is a provocative act. It's very bad for your health, says a skeletally thin woman dripping with diamonds and holding an orange juice in one hand. Just being alive is bad for the health, he replies. It always ends in death, sooner or later. The men laugh, the women eye this newcomer with interest. However, just at the moment, in the corridor about 20 yards away from where he was standing, the photographers start shouting, Hamid, Hamid, even from a distance, and with his view blocked by the people strolling about in the garden, he can see that the courtier with his companion, the same woman who in other parts of the world had walked into rooms with him, the same woman who used to hold his arm in that same affectionate, delicate, elegant way. Even before he has time to utter a sigh of relief, something else attracts his attention and makes him look away. A man has just entered from the other side of the garden without being stopped by any of the security guards. The man glances this way and that as if searching for someone, but that someone is clearly not a friend lost in the throng. Without saying goodbye to the group he's with, Igor goes back to the two young women. They were still standing by the balustrade. Standing by the balustrade talking. He takes the actress's hand in his and makes a silent prayer to the girl with the dark eyebrows. He asks forgiveness for having doubted. But we human beings are still so impure and capable of understanding the blessings so generously bestowed on us. You're moving a bit fast, aren't you? Says the actress, making no attempt to move away. Yes, I am, but given what you've been telling me, everything in your life is moving fast today. She laughs. The sad girl laughs too. The policeman passes by without noticing him. He's been told to look out for the men in their 40s with slightly graying hair, but for men on their own. "9:20 p.m. Doctors look at test results, which are completely at odds with what they believe the actual illness to be, and must then decide whether to trust science or their hearts. They learn with time and experience to give more weight to their instincts, and they find that the outcomes for their patients improve. Successful businessmen pore over graphs and diagrams, then go completely against the market trend and grow still richer. Artists write books or films about which everyone says, that won't work, no one's interested in things like that, and end up becoming icons of pop culture. Religious leaders preach fear and guilt rather than love, which should, in theory, be the most important thing in the world, and their congregations swell. Only one group consistently fail to go against the current trend: politicians. They want to please everyone and stick rigidly to the rules of political correctness. They end up having to resign, apologize, or contradict themselves. Morris keeps opening one window after another on his computer. This has nothing to do with technology, but with intuition. He's tried distracting himself with the Dow Jones Index, but wasn't pleased with the results. It would be best to focus a little on some of the characters he's lived with for much of his life. He looks again at the video in which Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, is describing in a calm voice how he killed 48 women, most of them prostitutes. Ridgway is doing this not because he wants absolution for his sins or to relieve his conscience, but the public prosecutor has offered to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment if he confesses. For despite having acted with impunity for a long time, Ridgway had left insufficient evidence to convict him, or perhaps he had just grown weary of the macabre task he had set himself. Ridgway had a steady job, spraying trucks, and could only remember his victims by relating them to whither he had been working that day. For 20 years, sometimes with more than 50 detectives on his trail, he managed to commit murder after murder without ever leaving any kind of signature or clue. One of the detectives on the tape comments that Ridgway wasn't very bright, wasn't too good at his job, or very educated, but was a perfect killer. In short, he was born to be a killer, even though he had always lived in the same place. His case, at one point, was even filed away as insoluble. Morris had watched the same video hundreds of times. It has in the past given him the necessary inspiration to solve other cases, but not today. He closes down that window and opens another, which shows a letter written by the father of Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal who is responsible for killing and dismembering 17 men between 1978 and 1991. Initially, of course, I couldn't believe that it was really Jeff who had done the things the police had accused him of. How could anyone believe that his son could do such things? I had been in the actual places where they said he had done them. I had been in the rooms and basements, which at other moments, according to the police, had been nothing less than a slaughterhouse. I had looked in my son's refrigerator and seen only scattering of milk cartons and soda cans. I had leaned casually on the black table they claimed my son had used both as a dissecting table and a bizarre satanic altar. How was it possible that all of this had been hidden from me? Not only the horrible physical evidence of my son's crimes, but the dark nature of the man who had committed them. This child I'd held in my arms 1,000 times, and whose face, when I glimpsed it in the newspapers, looked like mine. If the police had told me that my son was dead, I would have thought differently about him. If they told me that a strange man had lured him into a seedy apartment and a few minutes later drugged, strangled, and sexually assaulted and mutilated his dead body. In other words, if they told me the same horrible things that they had to tell so many other fathers and mothers in July of 1991, then I would have done what they have done. I would have mourned my son and demanded that the man who'd killed him be profoundly punished, if not executed, then separated forever from the rest of us. After that, I would have tried to think of my son warmly. I would, I hope, have visited his grave from time to time, spoken of him and with loss and affection, continued as much as possible to be the custodian of his memory. But I wasn't told that what these other mothers and fathers were told, that their sons were dead at the hands of a murderer. Instead, I was told that my son was the one who murdered their sons. The satanic altar. Charles Manson and his family in 1969, 3 people burst into a house occupied by a film star and killed everyone there, including a young man who happened to be driving away from the house. 2 more murders followed on the next day, a married couple, both of whom were business people. Manson claimed to be capable of killing the whole of humanity. For the 1,000th time, Morris looked at the photo of the man behind those crimes, smiling at the camera, surrounded by hippie friends, including famous pop musicians of the day. They all seemed perfectly harmless, talking about peace and love. He closes down all the windows, kind of like Osho, whatever. He closes down all the windows. Manson is the closest thing to what is happening now, involving as it does in the cinema, as in well-known victims, a kind of political manifesto against luxury, consumerism, and celebrity. Manson, however, was only the brains behind the killings. He didn't actually murder anyone himself. He left that to his acolytes. No, that's not it. And despite the emails he has sent explaining that he can't provide answers in such a short space of time, here, gotta readjust. It's been a minute. Morris is beginning to experience what all detectives always feel about serial killers. It's becoming a personal matter. On the one hand, there's a man, doubtless, with some other profession who, given the weapons he uses, has clearly planned the murders in advance, but who is on entirely unfamiliar territory where he has no knowledge of the competence or otherwise of the local police force. He is therefore a vulnerable man. On the other hand, there's the accumulated experience of all kinds of security organizations accustomed to dealing with society's aberrance, but apparently incapable of stopping the bloody trail left by this rank amateur. He's not an amateur. He should never have responded to the commissioner's call. He had decided to live in the south of France because the climate was better, the people more amusing, the sea close at hand, and because he hoped that he still had many years ahead of him in which in which to be able to enjoy life's pleasures. He had left his job in London with a reputation for being the best, and now this one failure would be sure to reach the ears of his colleagues, and he would lose that reputation earned through hard work and great dedication. They'll say he was the first person to insist that modern computers be installed in our department, but despite all the technology at his disposal, he's simply too old to keep up with the challenges of new age. He presses the off button, the software logo comes up, and then the screen goes blank. Inside the machine, the electronic impulses disappear from the fixed memory and leave no feeling of guilt, remorse, or impotence. His body has no off buttons. The circuits in his brain keep working, always arriving to the same conclusion, trying to justify the unjustifiable, bruising his self-esteem, telling him that his colleagues are right. Perhaps his instincts and his capacity for analysis have been affected by age. He goes into the kitchen, turns on the espresso machine, which has been giving him problems lately. As with any modern domestic appliance, it's usually cheaper to throw the old one out and buy a new one. Fortunately, the machine decides to work this time, and he sips the resulting cup of coffee unhurriedly. A large part of his day involves pressing buttons: computer, printer, phone, lights, stove, coffee maker, fax machine. Now, though, he needs to press the right button in his brain. There's no point in rereading the documents sent through by the police. He needs to think laterally and make a list, however repetitive. A. The murderer is fairly well educated and sophisticated, at least as regards the weapons he uses, and he knows how to use them. B. He's not from the area. If he was, he would have chosen a better time to come, when there were fewer police around. C. He doesn't leave any clear signatures, so he obviously has no desire to be identified. This may seem self-evident, but such signatures are often a desperate way of the doctor trying to put a stop to the evils committed by the monster, or as if Dr. Jekyll were saying, "Please arrest me. I'm a danger to society, and I can't control myself." D. The fact that he was able to approach at least two of his victims, look them in the eye, and find out a little bit about them means that he's used to killing without remorse. Therefore, he must at some time have fought in a war. Getting closer. E. He must have money. A lot of money. Not just because Cannes is a very expensive place to stay during the festival, but because of the high cost of producing the envelope containing the hydrogen cyanide. They must have paid around $5,000 in all, $40